Muted. Okay, we are going to start. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have a wonderful opportunity to meet Mr. Ed Tarver. He is a candidate for the U.S. Senate. He is one of the 21 candidates who will be running in the jungle election on November 3rd. We are honored to have Mr. Tarver and his beautiful wife, Carol Tarver, here with us. And as I explained to Mr. Tarver, we really just want to learn more about him, his platform, for him to have an opportunity to learn about us and our platform and agenda, and an opportunity to answer some questions. So a little housekeeping, I'm going to ask everyone to mute themselves. If you would like to ask a question, please put that question in chat. Trish will get the question, and pretty much I hope that we just have a really productive conversation. We're very excited. I want to thank you both for being here and for, just jumping on this opportunity to speak to us. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Tarver.
Well, thank you, Ms. Lawson, and thank you for inviting me to address the now, is there an acronym that you use for ADOS? Okay.
ADOS, you can call us ADOS, but it stands for American Descendants of Slavery.
I understand that. I hadn't heard. We haven't been referring to it as ADOS in our office, but just ADOS. But that's fine. But certainly, thank you for the invitation to speak to the members of ADOS this evening. As you've indicated, I'm a candidate for the U.S. Senate in the November the 3rd special election to refill the seat vacated when former Senator Johnny Isaacson retired at the end of 2019. I'm running simply, I believe that I'm the most qualified candidate of those who have qualified. I've been using the number 20. I heard you say 21 tonight, but there were a number of individuals who qualified to run for this in the special election. We haven't been focused on the total number of people that are running because we're running to get our message out to the people of the state of Georgia. When I qualified on March 4th, I don't think myself or any other folks who qualified anticipated that they would be running through during a time of a global pandemic. And then once it became clear that was the situation that we have found ourselves in, I think all rules were out, and we all had to be flexible and to adjust our strategy in terms of how we were going to run this race and how we could effectively get our messages out to the people that we serve. In terms of platform, I think at least in my case, my platform has been refocused to those issues affecting Georgians right now, immediately. I think one of the primary obligations of anyone who seeks public office, who seeks elective office, is to address the needs of the people that they serve, and those needs are sometimes have to be prioritized. And I think during this time, our needs have been prioritized for us. We certainly have a concern about access to healthcare. We have concerns about the economic situation that's we find our state and our nation in terms of the economy. Over 50 million people having filed for unemployment since the pandemic had started. We find ourselves addressing the need for education and how we're going to continue to educate our children during this troubled time. Those issues are important to me, but even more so important to me is making sure that I can balance those issues with the issues that face our community. And when I say our community, I mean the African American community. There's some things that are I'm passionate about. I would like to give you just a brief summary of my background in history and why I believe that I'm the most qualified. candidate for this special election. If you've seen my bio, you know that I'm originally from Augusta. I graduated from undergraduate school here at Augusta College back when it was Augusta College. Now it's Augusta University. And after leaving college, I followed in the footsteps of my father. I entered the United States Army through the ROTC program. I served for 7 years. I was attained the rank of captain. I was able to command soldiers while I was in the military. And I did that up until the time that I permanently injured my knee and received a medical discharge. Most people would have looked upon that as something that was devastating and detrimental. In my case, it gave me an opportunity to pursue another dream or goal of mine, and that was to attend law school. And so I left the military and pursued a law degree. I graduated from the University of Georgia's Law School in 1991. And after leaving law school, I was immediately selected for a competitive position as a federal judicial law clerk in the United States District Court, the federal court in Augusta, working for Chief Judge Dudley Bowen. And I did that for a year before I was hired by the Augusta's oldest and largest law firm. I became their first African-American attorney and subsequently their first African-American partner in that firm. And I was with that firm for about 16 years before President Obama came and nominated me to be the United States Attorney, the Chief Federal Prosecutor for the Southern District of Georgia. With that nomination, I became the first African-American in the 240-year history of that district to represent the United States in the Southern District of Georgia, which is the 43 counties that make up the Southern District. You've heard me use the term first African American in for a number of the positions I've held. I don't wear that title as any particular badge of honor. I simply tell people that because I hope it will explain to them the situations that I found myself in throughout my career time and time again, and that is that the situations I went in at Hull Barrett, the situations that I went into even in the federal court system, and certainly the situation that I went in the Southern District of Georgia were all situations that, in order for me to be successful, required me to work and interact with people who were different from me. They looked different from me. They had different views and ideas and understandings of the impact of what we were doing has on the people that we were serving. I'm concerned, and that concern was enhanced during my time as U.S. Attorney with the impact of some of the things that we do or have done as a government, and the impact of those things on the African American community. You know, one of the things that was most fulfilling about serving under President Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder and subsequently Attorney General Loretta Lynch was the fact that we embraced issues that were having an immediate effect on the people in our district, and we were urged to get actively involved. And so I've been into prisons. I've met with ex-felons. I have put in place reentry programs that will enable individuals to reenter society. I think one of the things that we in the administration were most concerned about was the fact that if you go back 20 or more years, there was a time in this country when as a nation, we embraced a get tough on crime policy. And it'd be nice if we could blame that on all the majority people who were in public office. But the reality is that many African American, many minority legislators embraced that policy as well, and it resulted in statutes being changed across the board at the federal and state level. It resulted in discretion being taken away from judges. It resulted in mandatory minimum sentences across the board for a lot of offenses, most offenses in this country. And you asked, and looking in hindsight, what has that led to? Well, we are at a point now in 2020, in the year 2020, where the United States as a country, as a nation, imprisons more of its citizens than any other country on the planet. And back when we were in school, if anybody would have ever suggested that, you would not have believed that that was something that was even remotely possible. Well, that is the situation right now, that we incarcerate more people than any other nation on the planet. And then when you look at the makeup of those 2 million plus people that are in our state and federal prisons now, we learned that 78, and fastly approaching 80% of those people are Black or brown. And so you ask yourself, back 20, 25, 30 years ago, when we as a nation embraced this get tough on crime philosophy and took the actions in conjunction with that, was it intentional that we would reach this point, that people anticipate or foresee that we would reach a point where we are incarcerating as many people as we are, and whether or not as many of those who are currently incarcerated are Black or brown? We do know that if you look at some of the think tanks, and the one that comes to mind for me, and the one that I quote most oftenly, is the Brennan Center for Justice out of Washington. You know, they've done some extensive research and study on this issue, and they will tell you that in this country today, that if you are Black or brown and you have an interaction with law enforcement, doesn't matter whether the interaction is a result of someone calling 911 or whatever, if you just happen to have a spontaneous interaction with law enforcement, that interaction is as a result of that interaction, you have a greater probability of being taken into custody. Taken into custody meaning that somebody's going to put handcuffs on you. They're going to turn you around and put you up against some building or some vehicle and pat you down. And there's a proof or study that shows that there's a greater probability of that happening if you are Black or brown. And the Brennan Center goes a step farther. They say if you have that interaction with law enforcement and at some point they take you into custody, it's a greater probability that if you are Black or brown, that you're going to be charged with some kind of crime. The statistics show that, and they even go a step farther in saying that if you are charged with a crime, there's a greater probability that you're going to be convicted and sentenced to some term of confinement. And so we know that that's happening. We know that that's happening today in 2020, and we know that there's nothing significant that's been done to reverse that situation or to correct it. One of the things that I will say to you is that while I'm focused on the impact of the global pandemic on Georgia and certainly on what's going on in the country, I'm also concerned about the advocacy by the Democratic Party, my party, on issues that affect people who look like me. And I'm concerned that it appears that as a party, we have, I won't say abandoned, but we certainly have not been as aggressive as we need to be and as we once were about issues affecting the Black family. We certainly have not been as aggressive as we need to be or as we should be about the thousands, the hundreds of thousands of young Black men and women who are incarcerated in our system, and many of them for nonviolent offenses that, in light of the technology available to this country, the most powerful country on the world, on the planet, that certainly we could find a way to use our technology in a less expensive fashion to supervise those who require supervision, and to not incarcerate everybody because of our the false notion that it is going to make us safer by putting more people in jail. There are studies out there that show that that's not the case, and we need to start recognizing that, and we need to be more aggressive in bringing about change in that regard. I know that one of the issues that's important to ADOS is the issue of reparations. I certainly, it's an issue that has come up in some of the forums that we have. Okay, thank It's an issue that's come up in some of the forums that I participated in, and you know, I support Senator Cory Booker's legislation, Senate bill, where he has been able to get 13 co-sponsors for a study committee to study reparations. You know, one of the things that I try to share with one of the things that I share with people when we talk about when the issue of reparations come up is that it's not what some people think it is. It's not a matter of finding as many Black people as you can, as many African American people as you can, and giving them a check. You know, the impact of slavery and discrimination in this country has been so great and so broad that it addresses just about every factor, every characteristic, every area of the lives of many people in this country, and we certainly need to have a reparations plan if that's the direction that we go as a nation, and I think it's one that we should. I think that certainly as we approach the issue of reparations, we should ensure and do everything that we can to make sure that those who have been most affected by discrimination, racism, and slavery be the ones who are whose needs are identified initially. I think it should be a broad program that not only addresses some type of financial component, but also addresses having a significant educational component, a significant housing component. It should also have a component that specifically addresses what has happened to incarceration and the number of individuals who have been incarcerated as a result of some of the governmental policies and governmental sanctions that we have embraced in this country. I personally believe, based upon my serving as United States Attorney, and based upon the things that I was able to see when I was a member of the Department of Justice, is that if there was one thing that I would point to that has contributed most to the destruction of the Black family in this country, and it is our approach to law enforcement and our approach to incarceration. And I just don't believe that you can incarcerate as many people as we have as a nation in the percentages that we have incarcerated folks without having an impact on the Black family. And I base that in large part on the fact that having had the opportunity to travel the district while a U.S. attorney, and just with some of the criminal investigations that we undertook, or that the FBI and the ATF and the DEA undertook in cities in the Southern District, for example, in Savannah, we would after these major indictments of large numbers of people, we started a practice of going back into the community to see what the impact was on that community, and in many cases, in terms of African American males, just about all, I won't say all, but substantially all of them, as a result of one large investigation, would be removed from the community. And so you ask yourself, why is it that you have only one in four African American households is a two-parent household? That's a pretty significant percentage. So that's one of my passions. I also support what's happened with the Black Lives Matter movement. One of the things that I'm proud of and also disappointed about is that as a United States Attorney, we started a program across the Department of Justice that focused on implicit bias, which we went to great extremes to make sure that the DOJ required all law enforcement agencies that receive federal funds to have some type of implicit bias training, just to make folks understand, to give them examples that some of the decisions they were making in terms of who they approached, who they detained, who they charged, that there could be, and in many cases there were, racist components in how they proceeded. I was disappointed that after the new administration came in, all of those programs were stopped, and then there was no support for continuing in that direction. But I do believe that as a result of what's happened with George Floyd, as a result of what has happened with Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia, as a result of what happened with Breonna Taylor, as a result of what happened this past weekend with the killings in Wisconsin and I'm having a brain freeze in Louisiana, that we see that there's a tremendous need to address. I posted on my social media networks today, my social media platforms. I posted the statement that it's time for us to bring an end to the government-sanctioned genocide of Black men in this country, and that's what it's amounting to. Because I mean, the list of young Black men who are losing their lives at the hands of law enforcement is just ridiculous, and it's time that we do something about it. And the place to start is in Washington at the highest levels of our government. And then I also think that we're long overdue with legislation starting from Washington and working its way down that will enable the citizens to hold law enforcement accountable when they engage in excessive force, when they engage in misconduct, when they kill, injure, or harm somebody. Then they ought to be subject to the same criminal and civil legal system that the rest of us are subject to. And we all know that that's not the case right now. And so I would certainly support those efforts. Now, I will definitely be honest with you, as someone who's served time in the military and who has been a federal prosecutor. You know, I'm not one that is going to suggest to you by any means that I'm advocating for the dismantling of our law enforcement system. I believe that in order for us to continue to have our system of in our society, where orderly society, that we need some organized law enforcement to help maintain and to keep order. And but I do think that we certainly should look at the obligations that we place on our law enforcement officers, the guidelines and the structures under which they operate. And one of the things that I'm caused to remember is a statement by President Obama that he would say to us when we would meet. And he would say that if the only tool in your toolbox was a hammer, then every problem becomes a nail. And I think we see that with our law enforcement in many cases, whether we want to accept it or not. The only tool that a police officer has is to put somebody into custody and to take them to jail. And so what we're seeing is whatever the problem, whatever the issue that they're confronted with, their first and only resource is to pull out handcuffs or to draw a weapon and to take someone into custody or to injure or harm or kill someone. And I think it's time for us to look at alternatives, to look at retraining, to make sure that we can provide them with other resources, especially in this age when we know that more and more of the people who come in contact with law enforcement are either addicted to some type of criminal substance or under the or they suffer from some type of mental illness. And if you go into our jails and you talk to any of those folks who are charged with providing those confinement at those levels, you'll see that there are in some cases entire wings that are devoted to housing the mentally ill or the chemically dependent. And I think we ought to do something about that. I've gone for about 20 minutes.
I know, and I can hear your voice cracking, so I'm going to give you a break. Okay. Thank you so much. I want to.
Questions.
Thank you so much, and I can say that it's refreshing hearing some of the things that you said, because we don't often hear politicians say the few things that you have said. But I'm going to share my screen and give you a little break. I want to, as I said, tell you who we are. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I want to give you some information about who we are, what we stand for, and what our agenda is in our advocacy and what we will be pushing for. And so after I go through that, it'll take me about 10 minutes. Then we can open it up for questions, Q&A. If you have questions for us, by all means, feel free to ask questions. But I know we have some people who have questions for you as well. Naheem and Trish will have you handle the questions. And so let me start. So we are American descendants of slavery. We are descended from the original first people who were here in 1719, the first Africans who came here through Virginia, in 1619. And so basically our advocacy is focused on that group that was enslaved in America. That was 3/5 of a person that after slavery, they were subjected to convict leasing. After convict leasing, they were subjected to Jim Crow and racial terrorism, to redlining, to mass incarceration. And so we feel, as you said, because of that, because we were not allowed to participate in the capitalist system, and when we did do for ourselves in places like in North Carolina and Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, white mobs would come in and destroy all of our wealth. We do feel as though the federal government has an obligation and a duty to pay reparations, in part a cash payment, but also other programs, because we feel as though reparations is not a program to make us better consumers. It is a program to put us into ownership. So when you hear more progressive Democrats talk about the Green New Deal, okay, we can sign on to the Green New Deal if ADOS are going to have 25% ownership stake in the Green New Deal. So that's our approach. Our approach is not to become better consumers, but to be the owners that we would have been, because we were the only skilled people after the Civil War in this country if we were allowed to compete. So as a result of us not being able to compete by legislation, federally sanctioned racial terrorism, we see now what we have is the racial wealth gap. So you see you have white people up here, and this is wealth. Obviously, wealth is not your income. It is actually the difference between your outlay and your income. So then you see Black people down here starting back in 1983. There's a significant wealth gap. And so ADOS believes that wealth gap is a result of being locked out of the system over 400 years. And we believe that reparations is supposed to address this racial wealth gap. So here's another slide. And so basically this slide is telling you, one of the things that jumps out at us is that the white person with a less than high school degree, median wealth is $83,000. If you go up to a college graduate, a Black college graduate, the white person with less than a high school degree actually has more wealth than a Black college graduate. And that's because wealth is generational. It's multi-generational. That's because this white person who did not graduate high school has had wealth passed down, but we have not had that opportunity to pass down wealth because we've been locked out of the system. So another example of how we've been locked out of wealth, if you look, and this is The Color of Wealth, which was a study and this is peer-reviewed research by Dr. Sandy Darity and Derek Hamilton, Dr. Derek Hamilton. They completed this study in 4 cities, Los Angeles, Miami, Boston, and District of Columbia. This is ADOS, U.S. Black people. This is our liquidity, our cash on hand. In Los Angeles, $4,000. In Miami, $3,700. In Boston, $8. In DC, $3,500. But if you look at Black immigrants, who oftentimes are coming here, they're college educated, they're coming from an elite background, many of them come here with wealth. you see college immigrants, their wealth position is different than our wealth position. Latinos also, their position is different than ours. In some areas, it's lower, it's close, but in places like Miami, it's higher. If you compare it to whites in Los Angeles, their wealth is 355,000 to 4,000. In Boston, ADOS, $8 to 250,000. And then Asians, again, comparing in Los Angeles. So pretty much what you see is what is the result of us being locked out of this country. And this is why we need reparations to address that. I won't spend a lot of time on this. I can send you the slide deck, but this pretty much shows you, based on what your wealth position is, how you spend your money. So if you're making $10,000, you have $10,000 of wealth, a small percentage of that is going to be liquid. Most of it's primary residence and vehicle. But if you go up to someone who's a billionaire, obviously most of this is in assets that are going to create wealth for them, versus very little up here with someone who's making $10,000, very little assets that are actually wealth generating. I would recommend, if you want to learn more about reparations and ADOS's stance on reparations, I would recommend a book, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 20th Century. It's by Dr. Darity. The book was just released this spring. It's a very comprehensive and exhaustive book about our history, how we got in this position, and how this position could be remedied. Also, you can visit us at ADOS101.com to learn more about our Black agenda. Some of our advocacy that we're doing is to edit H.R. 40, and you mentioned Senator Cory Booker's bill, which is modeled after H.R. 40, and we see some significant issues with those bills. Yes, we agree that there should be a study, but we don't think the way H.R. 40 is set up right now, we would like to see experts only on that commission. We would like the claim to go from when the United States was founded, 1776, to the present. We want the commissioners who were selected to only receive small stipends for their expenses. Right now, it's set up that those commissioners would get a GS-18 rating, which would be about $200,000 a year salary. Also, there's no time limit on H.R. 40, so they can go on indefinitely. I think there's $12 million attached to it. They can go on indefinitely, not come up with any proposals for reparations, and also, continue to collect the $200,000 a year salary. And so we want to make sure that it is going to address the racial wealth gap, and we want to make sure that there's an 18-month deadline. And we also want to make sure that those who will be eligible for reparations, one, are descended from people who were enslaved in America in chattel slavery, and that it also goes to someone who has lived their life as a Black person, a person who has identified as Black, colored, or Negro in the United States. So here's a definition of how we define ourselves, our ethnicity. And I don't know if you know this, you may know this, but there's only one group that is federally recognized as having an ethnicity, and that's the Hispanic group. And with that comes resources. So the federal government is mandated to make sure that they are accurately counted in the census. They're not mandated to make sure that Black people are accurately counted. There are also other areas like in commerce and education where the government has to go and figure out like how they're doing, what's their status, what's their position, is it changing? We don't have that, that from the government, and it's something that we desperately need. So basically we look at, are you descended from Africa? Yes, we're descended from Africa. No debate there. But our lineage is being a descendant of slavery. And our nationality is American, and our language is English. And that's why we consider ourselves and call ourselves, our ethnicity, American descendants of slavery. And We would like to get that recognized the same way Hispanics are recognized on a federal level, because we've contributed, we've built this country. This America is a slaveocracy. America would not have the wealth that America has if not for our ancestors building this country. And so we want recognition for that. We want recognition for fighting in every war in this country. We want recognition for enduring Jim Crow and convict leasing and redlining, and social status to be recognized. And so as a result, as I mentioned, once you become recognized federally, then the Department of Labor is forced to figure out your status and to account for your status. You also, the Department of Commerce as well, the census now has to go out because they're mandated to count us correctly. We all know we're undercounted. We're undercounted because the government does not really have a mandate to count us correctly as they do with Hispanics. So finally, my last slide I'm going to end with is just some information about our legislative agenda and what we're pushing for ADOS. One, if you are elected to the Senate, we would ask you to sponsor a bill that would complete a national color of wealth study. So where we look at it in Los Angeles and Miami, we want to see it for the entire country and to see like what our wealth position is for Georgians. One second. Oh. What the wealth position is for Georgians, what it is for New York. And we would want a national bill where the government would actually fund that bill. Introduce the federal ethnic designation and have that bill and that resolution for us so that we can begin to disaggregate and understand across the country what our position is in Commerce, Department of Labor, in the census, and make sure the census is mandated to accurately count us. HR 40. HR 40 has been, and this is, well, the Senate bill that Senator Cory Booker has introduced, that's recent, but HR 40 has been introduced for 30 years. We pointed out the issues with HR 40. At this point, if HR 40 does not pass, we need to edit or shred it. And so we'd be looking for someone to introduce a wholly new different reparations bill that really has some substance for us. And it could be a study, but we want a down payment and a study. And then secondly, to support state and local efforts for equity for ADOS. So that's pretty much who we are in a nutshell. We wanted to share the data because we are a data-driven group. And I will stop there for questions. If you have questions for us or if someone else has questions, Naheem and Trish, you can unmute yourself. And thank you so much for listening. And I do, again, appreciate you both being here. So I will stop there.
I do have one question. Are there criteria for membership for ADOS? I mean, what's the process for joining the organization?
Well, we use the term organization loosely, right? Because it's an identity at this point. So, I mean, we have allies, but for ADOS Atlanta, we're just looking for people who are interested in working towards advocacy for ADOS in the Atlanta region and national. So we would love, and let me just say this, we would love to continue a conversation with you after the election about ADOS, about our advocacy. We know that you've been in the Capitol. We think that you may have some information that could be useful for us in terms of our advocacy. So let's continue this conversation after today. We are open to that, and I hope you are as well.
Certainly.
Okay, so I will turn it over to Naheem and Trish.
So do you have any other questions, Mr. Tarver, Mrs. Tarver?
I would like to know whether or not there was any interaction or conversation with Senator Booker before he introduced the most recent bill.
No, he didn't interact with us. I think he just took HR 40 from Congress and copied it, like copied and pasted.
Are there any sister or competing organizations with ADOS? Are there other organizations out there that have a goal that's similar to or the same as ADOS?
There are competing organizations that have goals that they say are similar, but where we differ is we're very specific and we're data driven and we are grassroots and we're loud and we're moving and we're getting stuff done. The other organizations have been around for a couple of 2-3 decades and they've been sitting around. And now that we have pushed this to the forefront, they're the ones that Amira was alluding to with HR 40. I call it a slush fund, the way it's set up. With like, I think it was 13 members or 19, I don't know, 12, 13, 19 people, just random people, but from these different organizations who are set up to receive $200,000 per year until $12 million is used up. Slush fund. We don't want that. We want, if we're going to have a study, like she was saying, a down payment, and then you study away. And then, because yeah, America was built on our backs, and that's point blank and period. So yeah, let's do this study so everybody knows who we are and how we got here and why this is necessary. So yes, there are competing organizations.
I just wanted to speak to that real quick, if you don't mind. The competing organizations are NARC and NCOBRA. Mainly NCOBRA, I forget what the acronym spells out. I want to say it's National Coalition of Black Reparation, maybe Association, and NARC is the National African American Reparations Coalition. And the problem with HR 40, which is mirrored by Senate Bill 1083 introduced by Cory Booker, is that the way the language is drafted, and this has been studied by Dr. William Sandy Darity, who is economist, professor at Duke University, is that the bill, the way that it is currently drafted, it's not necessarily drafted to create the results that we are looking for. There were proposals made to the bill. Matter of fact, not proposals, there was an edit to the bill made that added these particular groups as those that would sit upon the commission. And that's when the budget was raised in the bill originally introduced by John Conyers from $8 million to $12 million. And so these economists have raised alarms that this particular bill is nothing more than a slush fund, as the sister so eloquently put it. And we want to make sure that this bill is not to enrich someone's coffers, but that it's serious insofar as studying reparations. And, you know, if elected, we would love for you to take a look at what we are talking about. We would love for you to look at the edits that Dr. Sandy Darity has proposed as well. He is one of the top economists in the nation, as Sister Amira has shown. He and his wife, A. Kirsten Mullen, has written the book, From Here to Equality, reparations in the Black reparations in the 21st century. I hope I said that subtitle correctly. And he gives a layout. They give a layout from A to Z on reparations. And some of those concerns are also listed in the book. So we would definitely need a champion in the Senate to say, well, let us take a look at the current draft of this bill, because from the way it looks, it's not designed in the same way. I think it's the Civil Liberties Act bill for the Japanese Americans were drafted so that they could receive their reparations. It was pretty cut and dry. I believe it took only 9 months. Don't quote me directly on that, for them to come to the conclusions that's needed. But the way this bill is drafted, they could go for 4 or 5 years at GS 18 pay, which pays out about $200,000 a year. So we don't think that they are serious about this bill. We think that they are only in it for a payday.
Another issue with it is that it's the distinction regarding reparations. Their recipients are supposed to be descendants of chattel slavery in the United States, but in the way that it's written now, it's every person that identifies as Black in the United States. And that's a problem. It's not going to go anywhere if it's written that way.
Yes.
Is there a committee or that speaks for ADOS on this issue? In terms of language and the breadth of the legislation, who has the authority to speak for ADOS on this issue?
Well, no one. We do. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but the economist that I mentioned, Dr. Sandy Darity, he would be the point man because he understands what's needed. He's one of the nation's top socioeconomists. So if I had to introduce you to someone, it would definitely be Dr. Darity. I would say that what he's proposing makes sense. You know, as was just stated by Sister Trish, one of the issues is that they are trying to push for reparations for everyone in the diaspora. And America is not responsible for reparations going to everyone in the diaspora. That's like saying Chinese people in America should also receive Japanese reparations because they too identify as Asian. So I would say that Sandy Darity is the leading voice in this space, and he does advocate for America's descendants of slavery insofar as this reparations issue is concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Let me stop right there. Dr. Darity is obviously a wonderful resource for us, but I would like to make sure that you are aware of our co-founders, Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. Yvette Carnell went to Howard University. She is a political scientist. She's worked up on Capitol Hill. And Antonio Moore is an attorney in Los Angeles. Also, I don't know if you are churchgoers, but we are having a pastor's town hall on the 31st. I will make sure I send that information to you because there's another very important voice in this movement, Dr. Kevin Cosby. He is the pastor of St. Stephen's Church in Louisville, and he is also the president of Simmons College of Kentucky in HBCU. He's the president, and at the helm of that college, he does not take a salary. And he makes sure that every student who matriculates through that college leaves without student debt. So those are the advisory brain trust of our movement. So definitely, if you were interested in speaking to them, we will make sure of that. And also, we want to invite you out to our Pastor's Town Hall so you can learn about the biblical justification for reparations.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll start with the questions in the chat. So from Mike, he said that Mr. Tarver stated first African-American for several positions. However, we're experiencing first non-ADOS in a lot of positions. What's your take on immigration?
Well, you know, that's a good first question. We were working on some information today with the campaign, and the issue of sanctuary cities came up, and you know, in Georgia, there really two areas: the CAB and one other area that identifies sanctuary cities. And the question was whether or not I would support disqualifying those cities from all federal funds for their role as a sanctuary city. I don't advocate support discrimination against any group based upon immigration status. I think that I support immigration reform. I recognize that there are a lot of immigrants here in this country, and that the attitude towards immigrants is inconsistent with reality. When we hear the term immigration or immigrant, many people think Hispanic, they think the southern border, but reality, people immigrate to this country from all over the world, and it seems like there's some who receive greater scrutiny and greater attention than others. I certainly would be mindful of why people immigrate to this country. I mean, we project ourselves as the greatest country on the planet. People come here in search of the American dream, and it seems like some of the rhetoric that we hear, some of the proposed legislation that's been offered to address immigration seems to be designed to limit those who look like me, who have black or brown skin, from pursuing that American dream. And I want to make sure that we don't open the door for anything like that to happen. So I certainly am an advocate for immigration reform. I supported some of the things that my former boss, President Obama, embraced, like DACA. But I think there are other issues that we need to address. And I don't want to get into a situation where immigrants are treated like African Americans, like black folks were treated in this country at one time, where the perception is that everything is bad, everything that goes wrong in this country, those are the people that we blame for it. And so, yeah, I hope that answers your question regarding my position regarding immigration.
So are you saying, okay, so our position is we're first. Like, we have to be taken care of. We've been here the longest. We are not immigrants, and everyone that comes here rides on our backs, and we're not exaggerating. And so for us, immigration turns out to be like an albatross. We get pushed to the side because everyone cares about other people, even us. And quite frankly, for me, I didn't understand our positionality until I started reading and studying and got involved with ADOS. And then I was like, oh my God, like, we keep getting shoved to the back, and eventually will become extinct because we can't afford to live here. So our issue is we have to be taken care of. Yeah, you can help immigrants, but we are not immigrants. And the statements that people are saying now on public and national forums that this is a country of immigrants, I beg to differ. No, it's not. This country was built on slavery, and like Amira said, it's a slaveocracy. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I agree with you when you say that we are not immigrants. I agree with that 100%. I embrace that statement. I guess where I would deviate is, I think that we need to look to those that we allow to represent us. And I think if you heard me in my opening comments, for one, I've been a Democrat all my life, but I'm greatly disappointed with the party's position on issues that impact and affect African Americans. And I compare it to a situation that I sometimes encounter with some of the community organizations I've been in. One in particular, I went through I participated in the Leadership Georgia program, program that selects individuals from across the state to go through a 1-year program, and we have and it has a pretty elaborate selection process because they limit the size of the group to 60 per year, and so I was amazed the first time I went through the selection program that when you go through, it's very simple. You know, you get a chance to review the applications, and then each application is presented one at a time, and it's done over the course of 3 meetings. The first meeting, it didn't take you long to realize that the application for every person of color, every Black person, didn't receive any opposition during the first meeting. Very few were cut or eliminated from consideration at the first meeting. The second meeting, a few more, but still there was when you made it to the third meeting, it was still this large pool of African Americans who were still in consideration before the third meeting. But at the end of the third meeting, it's always the same, that although there's a class of 60, fewer than 10% of the class were people of colors, even though we're a state that's about 30% African American. And the reason for that is that as you get into that third meeting, those African American candidates, although well qualified, were jettisoned. They were allowed to fall by the wayside. I see that what happens with the Democratic Party. Although election after election, we're held up as being the foundation, the core of the Democratic Party, when issues that impact Black people, when the issues that impact the Black family, issues related to mass incorporation are raised, those issues are the first ones to fall on the coloring room floor because there's just no passion to do anything to provide any meaningful assistance to the African American community. So I think that's where I would fall. And that no, we're not immigrants, and for anybody to suggest that African Americans in this country are immigrants, that would need to be challenged aggressively and passionately, and under no circumstances should African Americans, should Black folks be put into the same category as immigrants. We are part of the fabric of this nation, and so I don't see that as a conversation that should be even entertained.
Okay. And can I say, when you speak of Black and brown and people of color, that's like a slur to us. Like, we're descendants of slavery. We're not people of color, and brown has nothing to do with us.
Well, I certainly understand that, but I understand that in this country, the color, the Black, brown, whatever shade you want to use, we're all grouped into the same category. I mean, I think that in terms of the language that you propose with the HR 40, I think that there's a time for that distinction, and you have made it clear in the language of your proposed legislation that there is a distinction. But in terms of addressing issues that we all face right here every day, issues of police brutality and other issues that reflect on the implied bias that many of us experience in this country, I'm not sure that there's an opportunity to make that distinction for those types of issues. So certainly I don't have an issue with making that distinction as it relates to entitlement to reparations and membership in ADOS or those particular categories that you've discussed.
Mr. Tarver, I would push back a little bit on that, well, a lot on that, because of the fact that, the brown people have a federal designation that makes sure they get certain resources funneled to them that we don't have. So the brown people have a Hispanic caucus in Congress on Capitol Hill who advocates for them and only them. So, and we don't have that. We have the conscience of Congress who advocates for everybody. There's nobody in Capitol Hill that is just advocating for us, and we're at the bottom. So I can certainly understand your position. That's why we need to continue this conversation, because I think if we continue this conversation, we can pull some data and show you some things that would show that we can't base whether our commonality on police brutality, because our existence in this country and being in this country covers so much more and is so varied that I think it's unfair to us to define us in a group where the metric is, do white racist cops treat you poorly. So it is 8:34. How are you on time? Do you need to go? Do you have time for a few more questions? Or?
I have time for questions. I certainly want to respond to what you just said.
Yes, sir.
I don't use the designation of a black or brown as in the generic term. I mean, it's just a broad reference to people of color, and the fact that in this country, people of color, regardless of what your skin tone is, are treated badly. I think that deviates from the goal that you have. I'm not an expert with the goals that you've established for your organization, but I'm pleased to hear how well thought out they are, and that I would love to have a conversation with Professor Darity, because it seems like a considerable amount of research and time and thought has gone into what you're proposing. And so from that standpoint, it would be very easy to learn more about the cause and to join the cause, because it's not something that's haphazard or not supported by data, as you have indicated. And so I think there's data out there that I'm not aware of that would, but when I use black or brown, I'm not talking about Hispanic people solely or any other person. I'm just using that in the generic sense to say that people who are not white are treated worse than people who are white.
Okay. I think we have a question. Trish, do you have, we're going to switch gears because it's fair enough. I think we've come to an impasse, and I think we agree we probably need to have a little bit more conversation around this. But Trish, do you have anything on another topic?
Yeah. So next question. From Adolphus, would you support HR 7120, George Floyd Policing Act of 2020, with a focus on the language to repeal qualified immunity? And what role do you see citizen review boards with subpoena power playing?
I support laws changing, modifying qualified immunity. A foundation of my platform is that I plan to support all Georgians, to represent all Georgians, and I specifically want to represent folks who have been impacted by the kind of things that happened to George Floyd and to Ahmaud Arbery and to Breonna Taylor. So I don't have any concerns about embracing, advocating for, sponsoring legislation that would change qualified immunity as it exists today, because as a result of qualified immunity, we see time and time again that officers who engage in the type of behavior and conduct that led to the death of George Floyd and others are not held accountable, either civilly or criminally. And I think in terms of the qualified immunity argument, that goes to civil liability. And I certainly think that there should be some civil liability available for those who have engaged in excessive force, who have engaged in some type of misconduct that causes injury to a citizen.
Okay. Another question is from Franco Summer Hour. He wants to know, do you support cash payments to close the lineage wealth gap?
I'd like to know more about that. I support, as I said, I support a study committee. I support a determination of how those funds are going to be applied and utilized. And there's so many things as I sat in preparation, tried to prepare for my meeting with you tonight. I just came up with just in my mind, and I'm certainly not as educated or well versed on this issue as as the members of your organization are. But I certainly, one of the things that came out at the top of my list was, as we talk about reparations, what would be the impact on historically Black colleges and universities, and whether or not they would be included in some form in any type of reparation plan that's offered to the in this country. So I don't see this as just something that's going to be cash payments to individuals, regardless of how you define who those individuals should be. I think there are institutions out there that are deserving of consideration as well. And so I would like to be a part of the development of any plan that would provide for reparations in some amount and some type to address the impact of slavery on this country and the impacts of slavery and discrimination.
Right. So the question is, because we understand about the HBCUs and stuff like that, and that's part of ADOS101.com. Like, we've included that. But the question was about cash payments directly to the descendants, like the Japanese, like the Italians, like Jews, like the 9/11 victims who averaged $2.3 million per person, up to $7 million. Do you believe that we should also receive cash payments?
Well, I think that it's already been established that cash payments are an appropriate remedy. The question is, and will continue to be, how do you determine who receives those cash payments? And I even heard from some of your members that you don't advocate that everybody that's Black is a descendant of slaves. So in determining who is the recipient of those cash payments, I think is where the detail is going to be. And I certainly would want to know what that detail is. But certainly I don't have any objection to the cash payments. Should we determine or develop a formula that addresses those people most deserving of receiving reparations?
Okay, yes, and all the answers to your questions about who should receive it are also in Dr. Darity's book, From Here to Equality, and ADOS101.com. This next question is several. Go ahead.
Are these questions in the chat, and is it appropriate for me to go and read them while you're reading them?
Mm-hmm, yeah, they're in the chat.
Okay, so which one are we going to now?
So I'm looking at a question from Naheem. It said, would you support federal police reforms which would eliminate state police powers and create uniform police rules and procedure?
I'm not sure I fully understand that question. As a chief federal prosecutor for the Southern District of Georgia, for example, one of the principles that I relied on heavily was the principle of federal preemption. And so, if there was certainly in the area of criminal violations, if there was a criminal violation, even one where the state had assumed some type of jurisdiction over, if it impacted upon some type of federal statute or federal issue, then we were always able to assert preemption and step in. So I think to some extent that may be occurring already. At least it occurred in Georgia when I was a U.S. attorney. I certainly, one of the comments that I made here recently regarding Ahmaud Arbery and the situation that took place in Brunswick, Georgia, was I was disappointed when you look at the facts of that situation. You look at the circumstances under which Mr. Arbery was murdered. That at no time did the U.S. attorney step in and exert that federal preemption and to provide the constitutional protections that are required in this country. And so, if I understand Naheem's question, I certainly agree that in some cases that's appropriate, and I think that there's the law provides for that to occur now. That doesn't mean that there can't be some modifications or changes to the law to make it more clear, and to certainly after what's happened this year in this country, there may be some amendments to the current law that will make it more make it mandatory for when that should happen, and to make it less discretionary.
I just want to
Okay.
say,
Go ahead.
yeah,
I can't hear you.
can you hear me?
Yeah,
I
we're
can't.
hearing you now.
You know, I think the Ahmaud Arbery case, although those weren't police officers, I think that case gives us a clear indication, particularly in, as you look at my question about federal reform at the federal level, because even you stated that it took so long for federal assistance to come in, or federal law enforcement to come in, federal attorneys, et cetera, to even look at this case because it was largely swept under the rug. And I think that, and I mean, I don't want to get into too much of it, but I think that if we had some reforms at the federal level which strip the states of the policing powers and put it in the hands of the federal government, that it would eliminate a lot of what we see with police forces all over the United States of America. Because, like in New York, where I'm from, for instance, you have the Police Benevolent Association, and you know, basically the cops can get away with anything, and they have a cookie cutter response to everything that goes on. And in many of those cases, they never reach federal level. They stay at the state level, and this emboldens the police officers to continue to do what they're doing. So, you know, I guess my question, it may be some wishful thinking, but I do think that it should be a serious proposal, because I don't see any other way that we stop what happened in Wisconsin over the weekend. And there's another instance in another place, I think it was Louisiana, you mentioned it, where 2 men were shot in their backs walking away from police officers. They do that because they feel that they can get away with it at the state level. And one more quick point, Eric Holder went into Ferguson, and you know, the Department of Justice during Obama's administration went in there and, in my opinion, basically ignored all of the data that showed that there was rampant racism in the law enforcement in that, within that state, I believe, in and of itself. And
Well, that statement alone kind of responds to my question. I mean, we just look historically. I mean, I don't want to create a situation where we look to the federal government, the Department of Justice, as the end all, the be all in terms of stopping discrimination or racism or improper behavior. I mean, we only need to look back to the civil rights movement. And one of the things that we learned a great deal from John Lewis was that the extensive period of time where the Department of Justice, the one agency that was put in place to enforce our constitutional rights, they stood on the sidelines silent and acquiesced to all the law breaking, the murders and the killings that took place in the South. And so to adopt the language that you have in your question about eliminating state police powers in hopes that the federal government, the federal department, federal law enforcement would be the champion for everybody. I'm not sure I'm at a point where I would embrace that concept, because especially during a time like this with who we have in the White House and what we've seen occurring out of our Justice Department right now. So I would want to consider some other alternatives than to just relying solely, you know, eliminating the power at the state level and relying solely on the power of the federal police. And I mean, that would be my thought.
Okay, Mr. Tarver, it's past 8:45. Ashlyn has indicated that for the questions that we have that you weren't able to get to, she's going to copy them and we can follow up with you. I have some follow-up items to send to you. Also, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I just, this has been probably one of the more interesting interactions that I've had since I've been a candidate.
Great.
I'm sure you understand a very tough issue, and discuss and provides a format for discussion and a very educational format, and I've appreciated that. I've learned from what I've heard tonight. I look forward to learning more about the issues. I'm not sure that we will agree on all the points that are raised, but I've learned about, and you've mentioned Professor Darity a lot. I do plan to get a copy of his book and to see if I can learn more, because I believe that this is an issue that I will be confronting when I become Georgia's next U.S. Senator. And I also believe that the information that will come from what I've learned this evening will be helpful as I take on my own party and as I press them to be more passionate and more aggressive about some issues that affect people that I represent, that I will represent in this state. So I thank you for that.
No, thank you. Thank you both for your time. I appreciate Ashlyn. Way to go. It was wonderful working with her. So I appreciate that. And we will be in touch. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Good to meet you all.
Nice to meet you as well. Have a great evening. Thank you, Ms. Tarver.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to stay on and debrief. Who do we have on? We want to make sure that, let's see, are they?
Hold on, let me see.
Oh,
Juliet. Who's Felicia Becca?
I've seen her name before.
Okay.
I think she's with us, right? Felicia?
I am.
I've seen her name before. Okay. Everyone else looks like I'm sorry?
Sorry, this is Ishmael. I was wondering, are we keeping on the recording for the debrief?
No, thank you very much for that reminder.
No problem.